Hello, dear English learners, and welcome back to English in Advance. I'm your host, Jessica, and I'm so glad you've decided to spend some time with me today. I want to talk about something that I know affects so many of you. It's a feeling that can be incredibly frustrating and even a little disheartening. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you can perfectly understand English? Maybe you're watching a movie from the USA without subtitles and you're following the plot just fine. Or perhaps you're reading an article online and the meaning is completely clear to you. You can listen to podcasts, understand the news, and comprehend almost everything you hear or read. But then, the moment comes when it's your turn to speak. You open your mouth and nothing. Or the words come out jumbled, slow, and not at all like how you imagined them in your head. You freeze up. That confident feeling of understanding evaporates, and you're left feeling stuck. If this sounds familiar, I want you to take a deep breath and know that you are absolutely not alone. This experience, this gap between understanding and speaking, is one of the most common hurdles that English learners face. It can make you feel like you're failing or not making real progress. But I am here to tell you something very important. Understanding English is a massive achievement. It means you've already built a strong, solid foundation. The knowledge is there, inside your mind. The next step, and it's a step you can definitely take, is to build a bridge from that understanding to confident, flowing speech. The good news is that with the right mindset and the right strategies, you can and you will cross that bridge. In today's very detailed episode, we are going to dive deep into this topic. We'll explore the reasons why so many talented learners understand English beautifully but struggle to speak it. I'll share some insights into the psychology behind this, and most importantly, I'll provide you with simple, practical, and effective tips to start improving your speaking skills today. Whether you're learning English for your career, for travel, or just for the joy of connecting with new people, this episode is for you. By the time we're finished, you'll not only understand why this happens, but you'll also feel empowered with a clear plan to make progress every single day. So if you've ever had that thought, I understand English, but I just can't speak it, please stay tuned. We're about to turn that frustration into focused action and unlock the confident English speaker that is already inside you. Let me tell you a story about a former student of mine, a wonderful man named Leo. His story really illustrates this challenge perfectly. Leo was an incredibly bright software engineer from another country who'd moved to the United States for a fantastic job opportunity. His technical skills were off the charts. He had been studying English for over a decade, mostly through reading textbooks, technical manuals, and articles related to his field. He could read complex academic papers on computer science in English faster than many native speakers. He could sit in a lecture and absorb every single word. His passive understanding was easily at an advanced level, but when it came to active participation, well, that was a different story entirely. I remember the day he came to me for help, looking completely defeated. He told me about a team meeting he'd had that morning. His manager was going around the table asking for updates on a big project. Leo knew his part of the project inside and out. He had prepared his update in his mind, structuring the sentences perfectly. He knew exactly what he wanted to say. But when his manager turned to him and said, "Leo, what's your status?" He just froze. He described it as a wave of panic washing over him. His heart started pounding. His mouth went dry. The perfectly crafted sentences in his mind seemed to shatter into 1,000 tiny pieces. He managed to say a few simple words. Progress is good. Code is working. The team waited for more, but that's all he could manage. He could feel his face turning red with embarrassment. The worst part, he told me, was that he understood everything his colleagues were saying. He understood their detailed updates, their jokes, their questions. He was a participant in his mind, but a silent observer in the room. He looked at me with such frustration in his eyes and said, "Jessica, I know the words. I know the grammar. I understand every single thing they say. But when it's my turn, it feels like my brain and my mouth are not connected. I'm so scared that they think I'm not smart or that I don't know my job just because I can't speak well." This feeling is so incredibly common. For Leo, it wasn't a lack of knowledge. It was a combination of a lack of speaking practice and a deep-seated fear of making mistakes. He had spent thousands of hours putting information into his brain, but almost no time practicing how to get that information out through speech. His fear wasn't about English, really. It was about perception. He didn't want to sound unprofessional or unintelligent. He was holding himself to an impossibly high standard of perfection. Now, I know that many of you listening might see yourself in Leo's story. Maybe you've had a similar experience in a meeting, a classroom, or even just trying to order a coffee. You've done the work, you've studied for years, but the speaking part feels like an insurmountable mountain. You worry about your accent, about using the wrong tense, about pausing too long to find the right word. You worry about what other people will think. I want to assure you, these feelings are a normal part of the language learning journey. You are not broken, and you are not failing. Leo's journey to becoming a confident speaker wasn't overnight, and it didn't involve learning more grammar rules. Instead, we shifted his entire focus. The first thing that helped him was a profound change in mindset. He had to accept that making mistakes was not just okay. It was essential for learning. Every time he stumbled over a word or used the wrong preposition, it wasn't a failure. It was a data point. It was a signpost showing him where he needed a little more practice. We started small. We practiced simple, low-pressure conversations. He started by just talking to himself in the car on his way to work, describing the traffic or planning his day out loud in English. Then he started joining the team for lunch with the simple goal of asking each person one question, like, "How was your weekend?" "Hindi ba?" Slowly, sentence by sentence, conversation by conversation, he began to build what I call speaking muscle. He joined an online speaking club where we could practice with other learners in a safe, supportive environment. He realized everyone there was in the same boat, and no one was judging him. His confidence started to grow. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up and trying. Today, Leo is not just a participant in meetings. He leads them. He gives presentations to clients, travels for work, and comfortably jokes with his colleagues. Looking back, he says the most critical change was letting go of the need to be perfect and embracing the process of communication. He realized that speaking is about connection, not perfection. The more he practiced, the more the connection between his brain and his mouth strengthened, and the more natural it all became. I share Leo's story because it's a testament to the fact that this common challenge can be overcome. Just like Leo, you can bridge that gap. It requires practice, a healthy dose of patience with yourself, and the courage to make mistakes. The more you speak, the more comfortable you will become. And one day you'll look back and realize that speaking English has become just as easy as understanding it. So if you're in this situation, feeling stuck between understanding and speaking, you're probably asking yourself the big question: why? Why does this happen? It's a valid and important question because understanding the root cause is the first step toward finding the right solution. It feels illogical, doesn't it? You've invested so much time and effort. You've memorized vocabulary lists. You've studied complex grammar structures. You can follow along with fast-talking native speakers. Yet when it's your turn to contribute, the words just don't flow. The truth is, this is a completely normal phase in language acquisition, and it happens for several very specific and interconnected reasons. Let's explore some of the main reasons why your speaking skills might not be at the same level as your listening and reading skills. One of the most significant and straightforward reasons is a simple lack of practice. Think about learning any other skill, like playing the guitar. You could read dozens of books about music theory. You could watch hundreds of videos of famous guitarists, and you could memorize every single chord chart. You would have a deep understanding of how to play the guitar. But if you've never actually picked one up and practiced strumming the strings, would you be able to play a song? Of course not. Speaking a language is exactly the same. It is a physical, motor skill. It involves coordinating your brain, your breath, your vocal cords, your tongue, and your lips to produce sounds in a specific sequence. Reading and listening are primarily receptive skills. You are taking information in. Speaking, on the other hand, is a productive skill. You are creating something new. Most traditional language education focuses heavily on the receptive skills. We spend hours in classrooms reading texts, listening to audio, and doing grammar exercises. While this is essential for building your foundation of knowledge, it doesn't build the active, on-the-spot recall and physical coordination required for speaking. Speaking in real time requires you to retrieve words, assemble them into grammatically correct sentences, and pronounce them clearly, often in a matter of seconds. This is a much more demanding cognitive process than simply recognizing words you already know. The more you practice this process, the faster and more automatic it becomes. If you only speak once a week or once a month, your speaking muscle remains weak. But if you make speaking a small daily habit, you will find that it becomes stronger, easier, and much more natural over time. Another major barrier, and perhaps the most powerful one, is the fear of making mistakes. This fear can be paralyzing. It's the little voice in your head that whispers, "Don't say that, you might pronounce it wrong." Or, "What if they don't understand you?" Or, "You're going to sound foolish." We worry about making a grammar error, using the wrong word, or having an accent that someone might judge. But here is a fundamental truth about language learning. Mistakes are not just a part of the process, they are the fuel of the process. Every single mistake you make is an invaluable learning opportunity. When you try to say something and it comes out wrong, and someone corrects you or you correct yourself, that experience creates a much stronger memory in your brain than simply reading a rule in a textbook. Yet many of us, especially as adults, are so conditioned to avoid errors. We want to be polished and perfect. This fear is completely natural. No one enjoys feeling embarrassed. However, it's critical to reframe your perspective. Native speakers don't expect you to be perfect. In fact, most people are simply impressed and appreciative that you're making the effort to communicate in their language. The goal of communication is connection and understanding, not grammatical perfection. The key is to embrace your mistakes. See them as proof that you are trying, that you are pushing your boundaries. Every time you speak, you will improve, and as you improve, those mistakes will naturally become less frequent. But you cannot improve if you don't speak in the first place. This leads directly to the next reason, a lack of confidence. Sometimes, even when we have the knowledge and the ability, we just don't believe in ourselves enough to speak. Confidence plays an enormous role in our willingness to communicate. If we lack confidence, we are more likely to stay silent, to hesitate, to second-guess every word. This lack of confidence often stems from self-doubt and comparison. We might listen to native speakers and think, "I'll never sound like that." We might compare ourselves to other learners who seem to be more fluent, and we feel inadequate. This inner critic can be so loud that it drowns out our desire to speak. Building confidence is a gradual process, but it begins with small, successful speaking experiences. And one of the best ways to start is by changing your mindset. The goal is not to sound like a native speaker from New York or California. The goal is to communicate your thoughts and ideas effectively. Your accent is a part of your identity. It's not a flaw. The more you speak, even in small ways, the more you prove to yourself that you can do it. Each successful interaction, no matter how brief, adds a little bit of confidence to your emotional bank account. It's all about taking those small steps, pushing yourself just a little bit outside your comfort zone, one conversation at a time. Another common issue is related to speaking speed and fluency. Learners often feel that their brains work faster than their mouths. You might know the vocabulary, but when you try to speak, you struggle to find the right word quickly enough. This leads to awkward pauses, using filler words like and and feeling like you can't keep up with the natural pace of conversation. This happens because there's a difference between your passive vocabulary, words you recognize when you read or hear them, and your active vocabulary, words you can recall and use instantly in speech. Your passive vocabulary is almost always much, much larger. You might know the word sophisticated, for example, and understand it perfectly when you read it. But it might take you a few seconds to retrieve that word when you're trying to describe a piece of art in a conversation. This is a retrieval problem, not a knowledge problem. Speaking is like building a superhighway in your brain between a concept and a word. The first few times you use a new word, you're like a car driving on a slow, bumpy country road. It takes time to get there. But the more you practice retrieving and using that word, the more that road gets paved and widened. With enough practice, it becomes a multi-lane superhighway and the word comes to you almost instantly. Fluency improves with practice because that mental retrieval process becomes faster and more efficient. Then there's the fear of a communication breakdown. This is the worry that you won't be able to communicate your message clearly at all. You might worry that because of your accent, your grammar mistakes, or your limited vocabulary, the other person simply won't understand you. This fear can cause us to avoid speaking situations altogether. It's important to remember that communication is a two-way street. It's not just about you speaking perfectly, it's about a shared effort to understand. Most listeners are cooperative and will work with you. They might ask a clarifying question or repeat back what they think you said. This is a normal part of communication, even between native speakers. Furthermore, you have more tools than just words. You can use gestures, facial expressions, and you can even try to describe a word you can't remember. For example, if you can't remember the word screwdriver, you could say, the tool you use to turn a screw. The person will understand you. Communication is successful when your message gets across, even if the delivery isn't perfect. Most people will appreciate your effort and will be patient and understanding. Finally, a key issue is what we touched on earlier: limited vocabulary recall. This is different from not knowing the words. It means you know a lot of words, but you can't access them quickly enough during a spontaneous conversation. This is a direct result of focusing more on passive skills like reading and listening. When you read, you have time to pause and think about a word's meaning. When you listen, the context helps you understand. But when you speak, you are the one who has to pull that word out of your memory banks with no time to spare. Regular speaking practice is the only way to move words from your passive vocabulary storage into your active vocabulary toolkit. Speaking forces your brain to engage in this active recall process over and over again. The more you force your brain to do this, the better and faster it gets. As you can see, these reasons are all interconnected. A lack of practice leads to a fear of mistakes, which undermines your confidence, which makes you hesitate and worry about fluency, which reinforces your fear of communication breakdown. It can feel like a vicious cycle. But the good news is that you can break this cycle. Once you understand these underlying reasons, you can start to address them with targeted strategies. It all begins with recognizing the single most important solution, which we will talk about next: the transformative power of consistent speaking practice. Now that we have a clear understanding of why this gap between comprehension and speaking exists, let's turn our focus to the most powerful solution available: consistent, dedicated speaking practice. If you want to become a fluent and confident English speaker, speaking is not just an option, it is the absolute key. But why is it so critically important? Why is actively using your voice the most effective way to improve your speaking skills? Let's break down the profound impact of speaking practice on your language journey. First and foremost, speaking connects your knowledge to real-world action. When you learn English through books, apps, or classes, you are building a mental database of grammar rules, vocabulary, and sentence structures. This knowledge is incredibly valuable, but it remains theoretical. It's like having a toolbox filled with the best tools in the world, but never actually building anything. When you practice speaking, you are opening that toolbox and putting those tools to use. You are taking the abstract concepts you've learned and applying them in a dynamic, real-life context. For instance, you might know the grammatical rule for the present perfect tense. You can identify it in a sentence and explain how it's formed. But it's only when you try to use it in a conversation, to say something like, "I've been to Chicago twice," that the rule becomes truly yours. Speaking forces you to make decisions in real time. Which tense should I use? What's the right preposition? How do I order these words? This active process forges strong neural pathways in your brain, making the connection between the knowledge and the action much stronger and faster. The more you speak, the more you bridge this gap, and the more your passive knowledge transforms into an active, usable skill. Secondly, speaking practice is the single best way to build genuine confidence. As we discussed, a lack of confidence is a huge barrier for many learners. You can't build confidence by thinking about it or wishing for it. Confidence is a byproduct of action and experience. Every time you open your mouth and speak English, you are taking a small step to prove to yourself that you can do it. It doesn't matter if it's not perfect. The act itself is a victory. When you practice regularly, you become accustomed to the sound of your own voice speaking English. You get used to making small mistakes and realize that the world doesn't end. You receive feedback, either from others or from your own self-correction, and you learn from it. Think of it like learning to swim. You can stand by the edge of the pool forever, feeling anxious, but your confidence only starts to build when you get in the water. The first time might be scary, but with each subsequent time, you become more comfortable and more sure of your abilities. Speaking is the same. The more you expose yourself to real conversations, the more you demystify the process, and the more your confidence will naturally grow. One of the most powerful transformations that occurs through speaking practice is that it trains you to think directly in English. Many learners, especially at the beginner and intermediate stages, go through a process of translation in their heads. They think of what they want to say in their native language, mentally translate it into English, and then speak it. This two-step process is slow, mentally exhausting, and often results in unnatural-sounding sentences because language structures differ. It's the reason for those long pauses and hesitations. When you commit to regular speaking practice, you force your brain to start forming thoughts directly in English. Instead of translating, "the dog is brown," you start to just see the dog, and the thought, "the brown dog," appears in English. This is the hallmark of fluency. Fluent speakers don't translate. They think and feel in the language they are speaking. To reach this level, you need to immerse your brain in the act of producing English so frequently that it becomes a habit. The more you practice speaking, the more your brain will default to thinking in English, which will dramatically increase your speed, fluency, and naturalness. Of course, speaking practice is essential for improving your pronunciation and overall fluency. These are physical aspects of language that cannot be mastered through reading alone. Pronunciation involves training the muscles in your mouth and tongue to make new sounds that may not exist in your native language. The only way to do this is through repetition, by actually saying the words out loud. When you practice speaking, you get the opportunity to focus on these sounds, on the stress and rhythm of English words, and on the musicality or intonation of sentences. You can hear yourself and compare it to native speakers, allowing you to make adjustments. Fluency, the ability to speak smoothly and without unnatural hesitation, also improves directly with practice. As you speak more, the process of word retrieval and sentence formation becomes more automatic. You'll find yourself pausing less to search for words, and your ideas will begin to flow more naturally. It's a gradual process, but consistent practice is the only path to achieving that smooth, effortless flow. Interestingly, practicing your speaking also makes you a better listener. It might seem counterintuitive, but speaking and listening are deeply intertwined. A real conversation is a dance between two people. To be a good speaking partner, you must be an active and engaged listener. You have to listen carefully to what the other person is saying in order to understand and formulate an appropriate response. This dynamic back and forth exchange trains your brain to listen more attentively and to pick up on the nuances of spoken language. Furthermore, when you are actively trying to improve your own pronunciation in connected speech, you start to notice these features more when you listen to others. You'll begin to recognize how native speakers link words together or use certain intonation patterns because you've been trying to do it yourself. This active engagement makes your listening skills much sharper and more sophisticated. At its heart, language is all about communication. Speaking practice is where you learn the art of real communication. It's more than just stringing words together. It's about learning how to express your personality, your ideas, and your emotions. It's about learning how to navigate a conversation, how to make small talk, how to ask follow-up questions, how to agree or disagree politely, and how to tell a story. These are practical communication skills that can only be learned through interaction with other people. The more you practice speaking, the better you become at not just producing correct English sentences, but at using English to connect with others on a human level. Finally, if your ultimate goal is to speak English fluently, then prioritizing speaking practice is the most efficient way to get there. While reading, writing, and listening are all vital components of a balanced learning plan, speaking is the skill that often produces the most visible and motivating improvements. When you practice speaking, you are actively using and reinforcing everything you've learned. This active use helps to cement vocabulary and grammar in your long-term memory far more effectively than passive review. The feedback loop is immediate. You say something, and you see if it's understood. This active engagement accelerates the entire learning process. In summary, the importance of speaking practice cannot be overstated. It's the engine of your progress. It connects knowledge to action, builds unbreakable confidence, trains you to think in English, perfects your pronunciation and fluency, sharpens your listening skills, and makes you a more effective communicator. If you truly want to bridge the gap between understanding and speaking, you must commit to using your voice. It might feel challenging at first, but with every word you speak, you are paving the way to fluency. One of the biggest mountains we have to climb on this journey is our own fear. The fear of speaking is real, and it can feel incredibly powerful. It's that nervous flutter in your stomach, the sweat on your palms, the thought that it's just safer to stay quiet. This fear is often the main reason why learners who know a lot of English still don't speak. However, fear is an emotion, not a permanent barrier. It's something you can understand, manage, and ultimately overcome. The truth is, every single person learning a new language experiences this fear to some degree. The key is not to let it control you. First, it is absolutely crucial to understand and accept that this fear is normal. You are not weak or strange for feeling this way. Almost every language learner has felt the fear of making a mistake, of sounding silly, of being judged, or of being misunderstood. These feelings are a natural part of stepping into a vulnerable position. When you speak a new language, you temporarily lose some of the eloquence and wit you have in your native tongue. It can feel like you're presenting a less intelligent version of yourself. Acknowledge this feeling. Give it a name, but don't give it power. Instead of fighting the fear, try to see it as a positive sign. Fear often shows up when you are right on the edge of your comfort zone. It's a signal that you are about to do something that will help you grow. So when you feel that fear before a conversation, you can reframe it in your mind. Ah, there's that feeling. This means I'm about to level up. Recognizing that it's a universal part of the journey can make it feel much less personal and intimidating. A powerful mental shift you need to make is to change your goal from perfection to progress. So many of us are afraid to speak because we are waiting for the day when we can speak perfectly. We think, I'll start speaking more when my grammar is better, or I'll join a conversation when I know more vocabulary. This is a trap. Perfection is an impossible standard. Even native speakers make mistakes, use slang incorrectly, or stumble over their words. The real goal should be clear communication and steady progress. Celebrate the small victories. Did you successfully order a coffee today? That's progress. Did you ask a colleague a question in a meeting? That's progress. Instead of judging yourself for the mistakes you made in a conversation, praise yourself for having the conversation in the first place. When you let go of the need to be perfect, you liberate yourself from the pressure that causes so much anxiety. Allow yourself to be a learner. Allow yourself to be imperfect. This single change in mindset will dramatically reduce your fear. The fear of speaking can feel like a giant, unclimbable wall. If you try to scale it all at once, you'll feel overwhelmed. The solution is to start small and build your confidence brick by brick. Don't throw yourself into a high-stakes situation like giving a presentation on your first day. Start in low-pressure, safe environments. One of the best places to start is with yourself. Talk to yourself in English. It might feel silly at first, but it's an incredibly effective technique. As you're making breakfast, describe what you're doing out loud. I am getting the milk from the refrigerator. Now I'm pouring it into my bowl. This gets you used to the physical act of speaking English and hearing your own voice without any fear of judgment. From there, you can move to practicing with a trusted, supportive friend or a language partner who understands your learning. The goal is to accumulate successful, positive speaking experiences, no matter how small. These small wins build momentum and create a foundation of confidence that will allow you to take on bigger challenges later. Your inner dialogue, the things you tell yourself, has a massive impact on your fear and confidence. If you're constantly thinking, I'm terrible at English, or I'll never be able to speak fluently, you are reinforcing your fear. You can actively fight this with positive affirmations. An affirmation is a simple, positive statement that you repeat to yourself to change your mindset. It might sound a bit cheesy, but the science behind it is real. By repeating these statements, you can start to reprogram your brain's negative thought patterns. Find a few affirmations that resonate with you. For example, I am a confident English speaker. Every day my speaking gets a little bit better. It's okay to make mistakes. They help me learn. My accent is a sign of my courage. Write them down. Say them out loud in the morning when you look in the mirror. Repeat them in your head right before you enter a situation where you need to speak English. Over time, these positive messages will start to crowd out the negative, fearful ones, giving you the mental strength to speak up. To practice effectively, you need to find or create safe environments. A safe environment is any place where you feel comfortable practicing without the fear of harsh judgment or ridicule. As mentioned, speaking to yourself is the ultimate safe space. Recording your voice on your phone is another. You can listen back and be your own gentle coach, noticing areas for improvement without any external pressure. Online language exchange communities can also be wonderful. You can find a language partner who is also a learner, creating a relationship of mutual support. You're both in the same situation, which removes the feeling of being an inferior speaker. Joining a speaking club specifically for English learners is another excellent option. In these groups, everyone's goal is to practice and improve. The atmosphere is typically encouraging and collaborative. The key is to intentionally place yourself in situations where the stakes are low and the support is high. It's also important to learn how to distinguish between destructive criticism and constructive feedback. The fear of speaking is often a fear of being criticized. But what if you reframe that as an opportunity to receive helpful feedback? If a friend or teacher corrects your pronunciation, don't see it as them pointing out your failure. See it as them giving you a valuable gift that will help you improve. When you receive feedback, listen with an open mind. Say thank you and see it as a tool for growth. If you are practicing with a language partner, you can even ask them for specific feedback. You could say, "Could you please listen for any time I use the wrong preposition and let me know?" This puts you in control and turns a potentially scary experience into a targeted learning session. Embracing feedback, rather than fearing it, will accelerate your progress immensely. Fear thrives on uncertainty and lack of preparation. If you only try to speak English spontaneously without any regular practice, you will naturally feel anxious. You can combat this by creating a consistent routine for speaking practice. Just like you schedule time to go to the gym, schedule time in your calendar to speak English. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. Maybe it's 15 minutes every morning where you talk to yourself, or 2 30-minute sessions a week with your language partner. When you make it a routine, it becomes a normal part of your life rather than a big, scary event. Regular practice builds familiarity and muscle memory. You'll feel more prepared and in control, which will naturally reduce your anxiety when an unexpected opportunity to speak arises. Finally, when the fear feels overwhelming, take a moment to remind yourself of the bigger picture. Why did you start learning English in the first place? Was it to connect with people from different cultures, to advance in your career, to travel the world and have richer experiences, to enjoy movies and books in their original language? Your reasons are powerful motivators. The fear of speaking is a temporary obstacle standing between you and those amazing goals. Is letting that fear win worth giving up on those dreams? When you connect with your why, the fear of mispronouncing a word seems much smaller in comparison. You are doing this for yourself, for your future, for a more expansive life. That is a goal worth facing a little fear for. Overcoming this fear is a journey, not a destination. There will be days when you feel bold and days when you feel timid. That's okay. By understanding that fear is normal, focusing on progress, starting small, using positive self-talk, and creating a supportive practice routine, you can gradually diminish its power and step into your voice as a confident English speaker. Improving your speaking skills requires a practical, hands-on approach. It's about taking action consistently. So if you're ready to move from understanding to speaking, here are some incredibly practical and effective tips that you can start implementing today to make a real difference in your fluency and confidence. The single most important habit you can build is to speak English every single day. The key here is consistency, not duration. Even just 5 or 10 minutes of daily practice is far more effective than one long 2-hour session once a week. Daily practice keeps the language at the front of your mind and builds momentum. You don't need a conversation partner for this. You can talk to yourself, narrate your actions. As you walk around your house, say, "I'm walking to the kitchen to get a glass of water." Look out the window and describe the weather out loud. Read a short paragraph from a book or news article aloud. This simple act gets your mouth, tongue, and vocal cords accustomed to forming English sounds. It helps to solidify the connection between your brain and your mouth. The goal is to make speaking English a normal part of your daily routine, just like brushing your teeth. While speaking to yourself is a great start, you eventually need to practice with other people. Finding a language partner or a conversation buddy is one of the best ways to do this. This could be a friend who is also learning, or you can find people online through dedicated platforms. A language exchange, where you spend half the time speaking English and half the time speaking your native language, is a fantastic arrangement because it's a partnership of equals. You are both a teacher and a student. When looking for a partner, try to find someone who is patient, supportive, and at a similar level of motivation. Before you meet, you can even decide on a topic to talk about. This can reduce the anxiety of not knowing what to say. Having a regular appointment with a language partner creates accountability and gives you a dedicated time to practice interactive communication. A powerful technique to improve your pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation is to listen and repeat. This is often called shadowing. Find a short audio or video clip of a native speaker, a podcast, a scene from a TV show, or a short YouTube video. First, listen to a sentence or two. Then, pause the audio and try to repeat it exactly as you heard it. Pay close attention to the music of the language. Where does the speaker's voice go up or down? Which words do they stress? How do they link words together? You can even record yourself repeating the phrase and then compare your version to the original. This is like a workout for your mouth. It trains your muscles to produce English sounds more accurately and helps you sound much more natural. You're not just learning words, you're learning the melody of English. To speak fluently, you need a good supply of words at your disposal. However, instead of just memorizing long lists of individual words, focus on learning words in chunks or phrases. Language is not built from single words, but from common combinations of words. For example, instead of just learning the word appointment, learn the whole phrase make an appointment or I have a doctor's appointment. Instead of learning interested, learn I'm interested in. These chunks, or lexical phrases, are the building blocks of fluent speech. When you learn them together, you don't have to think about how to combine the words. They just roll off your tongue as a single unit. The best way to find these phrases is through listening and reading. When you hear or see a useful phrase, write the whole thing down in a notebook and practice using it in your own sentences. This will make your speech sound more natural and will reduce the mental effort of building sentences from scratch. Recording yourself speaking might feel a little uncomfortable at first, but it is an incredibly valuable tool for self-assessment. Our perception of how we sound is often different from reality. When you record yourself, you get an objective look, or listen, at your speaking skills. You can use your phone's voice memo app. Choose a simple topic like, "What did you do yesterday?" Or, "What are your plans for the weekend?" And speak for 1 or 2 minutes. Then listen back to the recording. Don't be overly critical. Instead, listen for specific things. How is your pace? Are you speaking too fast or too slow? Are there any pronunciation errors you consistently make? Do you use a lot of filler words like or like? This isn't about judgment, it's about gathering data. You can identify 1 or 2 things to work on. Then, a week later, you can record yourself again on the same topic and see if you've made progress. It's a powerful way to track your improvement and take control of your learning. As we discussed earlier, one of the biggest keys to fluency is learning to think directly in English. This is a habit you can consciously cultivate. Start simple. Throughout your day, try to name the objects around you in English in your head: table, chair, window, computer. Then, move on to forming simple sentences in your mind. If you're feeling hungry, instead of thinking it in your native language, try to formulate the thought, "I'm hungry, I think I'll make a sandwich." The next level is to have internal monologues or narrate your day in English, all inside your head. This constant low-pressure practice trains your brain to default to English. It makes the transition to speaking out loud much smoother because you've already been forming English sentences in your mind all day. It's a way to immerse yourself in the language without even opening your mouth. There are many language learning apps available today, and they can be a great supplementary tool for speaking practice. Many apps like Duolingo, Babbel, or Pimsleur have speaking exercises built into their lessons. They might ask you to repeat a phrase, and their speech recognition technology can give you immediate feedback on your pronunciation. While an app can never replace a real conversation with a human being, it can be a fantastic way to practice in a controlled, non-judgmental environment. You can use them to drill pronunciation, practice sentence structures, and build your active vocabulary. They are particularly useful for busy people who want to squeeze in a few minutes of practice during their commute or lunch break. Many learners feel pressure to speak quickly to sound fluent. This is a misconception. In fact, speaking too fast often leads to more mistakes and can make you harder to understand. When you are practicing, make a conscious effort to speak slowly and clearly. Rushing will only increase your anxiety and cause you to stumble over your words. Speaking slowly gives your brain more time to find the right words and construct your sentences properly. It also allows you to focus on your pronunciation and articulate each word clearly. Clarity is much more important than speed. As you become more confident and the words start to come more easily, your pace will naturally increase. But in the beginning, slow and steady definitely wins the race. Practicing with a partner is great, but practicing in a group can also be incredibly beneficial. Look for English-speaking clubs or conversation groups in your local community or online. Organizations like Toastmasters are fantastic for practicing public speaking in a structured and supportive environment. There are also countless informal groups that meet in cafes or online to simply chat in English. Being in a group exposes you to different accents and speaking styles. It also allows you to practice both speaking and listening in a more dynamic setting. You'll learn how to enter a conversation, interrupt politely, and interact with multiple people at once. It's a great way to make friends and build a community of fellow learners who can support and motivate you. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, you must be patient with yourself and find ways to stay motivated. Learning to speak a language fluently is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be good days and bad days. There will be times when you feel like you're making amazing progress and times when you feel like you've hit a plateau. This is normal. The key is not to get discouraged. Celebrate your small achievements along the way. Keep a journal to track your progress. Look back at a recording of yourself from 6 months ago and see how far you've come. To stay motivated, keep your long-term goals in mind. Create a vision board with pictures of the places you want to travel to or the career you want to have. Remind yourself why you are putting in all this hard work. Consistency is the magic ingredient. Keep practicing, stay patient, and trust the process. By incorporating these practical tips into your routine, you will steadily build the skills and the confidence you need to become the fluent English speaker you want to be. When we are trying to improve our speaking, we often focus solely on the act of speaking itself. But there's a secret weapon that many learners overlook: the power of listening. Listening and speaking are not two separate, independent skills. They are two sides of the same coin, deeply and intrinsically connected. In fact, improving your listening skills can be one of the most effective ways to improve your speaking skills. To become a great speaker, you must first become a great listener. The connection is fundamental. You cannot produce a sound that you have not first heard and processed. Think about how a baby learns its first language. For the first year or two of their life, they are almost exclusively listening. They are absorbing the sounds, rhythms, and patterns of the language around them. They are building a massive mental library of linguistic data. Then, when they finally start to speak, they are essentially trying to replicate the sounds they've been hearing for thousands of hours. The quality of their listening input directly determines the quality of their speaking output. The same principle applies to adult language learners. The more you listen to clear, natural English, the more data you provide your brain to work with when it's your turn to speak. By listening attentively, you learn the correct pronunciation of words. You hear how native speakers use intonation, the rise and fall of their voice, to convey meaning and emotion. You start to internalize the natural rhythm and flow of English sentences. You also absorb correct sentence structure and grammar in a natural context, rather than as abstract rules in a book. You hear how words and phrases are actually used in everyday conversation. All of this rich input builds a strong foundation that makes speaking much, much easier. This connection creates a powerful feedback loop that accelerates your learning. Here's how it works. You listen to English, perhaps a podcast or a conversation. Your brain takes in this input, noticing pronunciation, vocabulary, and sentence patterns. Then you try to speak. You attempt to use some of the words and structures you've recently heard. As you speak, you are also listening to yourself. You can compare what you're saying to the input you've received. Maybe you realize that you mispronounced a word, so you try to correct it. This process of listening, speaking, and self-monitoring creates a continuous cycle of improvement. The more you listen, the better your speaking becomes. The more you speak, the more you attune your ear to the nuances of the language, which in turn makes you an even better listener. For example, after listening to a native speaker use a particular idiom, you might try to use it yourself in a conversation. The act of using it actively cements it in your memory. Then, the next time you hear that idiom, you'll recognize it instantly. This feedback loop is constantly working to refine both your receptive and productive skills. Listening is absolutely essential for developing fluency. Fluency is not just about speaking fast, it's about speaking smoothly and naturally, with appropriate pauses and connections between words. When you listen to a lot of natural, conversational English, you start to notice things that you're never taught in a textbook. One of the most important is connected speech. Native speakers don't pronounce every single word separately and perfectly. They link words together to create a smooth flow. For example, they don't say, "What are you doing?" as 4 distinct words. It often sounds more like, "What you doing?" Or, "I am going to the store" becomes, "I'm gonna go to the store." By listening to these patterns over and over, you will start to unconsciously absorb them. Then, when you speak, you will begin to mimic them, which will make your own speech sound much more natural and fluent. You can't learn this from a grammar book. You can only learn it by listening to how people really talk. Listening can also be a powerful tool for overcoming the psychological barriers to speaking, especially the fear of making mistakes. When you listen to authentic, unscripted conversations between native speakers, you will quickly realize something important. They are not perfect. Native speakers make mistakes. They pause to think. They correct themselves mid-sentence. They use filler words. They sometimes forget a word. Hearing this can be incredibly liberating. It shows you that communication is often messy and imperfect, and that's completely okay. It takes the pressure off of you to be perfect. You realize that the goal is not flawless delivery, but effective communication. This understanding can significantly reduce your speaking anxiety and make you more willing to take risks and just try to get your message across. So, how can you become a better listener in a way that directly benefits your speaking? First, it's important to listen to a wide variety of content. Don't just listen to one podcast or watch one TV show. Expose yourself to different accents, American, British, etc., different speeds of speech, like a fast-paced news report versus a slow, thoughtful interview, and different contexts, formal presentations versus casual chats between friends. This variety will train your ear to be more flexible and adaptable. If you're a beginner, it can be helpful to start with content created specifically for learners. These materials often use clearer, slightly slower speech. As your comprehension improves, you can gradually move on to more authentic content made for native speakers. A great technique is to use subtitles or transcripts. Try listening to a short clip once without any text. See how much you can understand. Then, listen again while reading the transcript. This helps you connect the written words to the spoken sounds. Pay special attention to any words that surprised you in their pronunciation. Finally, practice active listening. Don't just have English on in the background. Really focus on what you're hearing. Pay attention to the speaker's tone of voice. Try to predict what they might say next. After listening, try to summarize the main points out loud. This active engagement turns passive listening into a powerful learning tool for speaking. By understanding and harnessing the profound connection between listening and speaking, you can dramatically accelerate your journey to fluency. They are a dynamic duo. When you invest time in improving your listening, you are simultaneously investing in your future speaking ability. The more you listen, the more you'll have to say, and the more you speak, the more you'll understand when you listen. In conclusion, the journey from understanding English to speaking it fluently and confidently is a path that so many of us walk. If you find yourself in that space, where the words are clear in your mind but get stuck on your tongue, please know that this is a normal and temporary stage. It's not a sign of failure, but a sign that you are ready to move to the next level of your language learning adventure. We've explored how this gap is often caused by a lack of practice, a fear of making mistakes, and a dip in confidence. But we've also seen that these are obstacles that can be overcome with the right mindset and strategies. The solution, at its core, is beautifully simple. You need to speak. Speaking practice is the bridge that will carry you from passive knowledge to active skill. It builds confidence, trains you to think in English, and perfects your pronunciation and fluency. And remember the vital connection to listening. By filling your ears with the sounds and rhythms of English, you are providing your brain with the essential raw materials it needs to produce speech. Listening and speaking work together, reinforcing each other in a powerful cycle of growth. So I encourage you to embrace the practical tips we've discussed. Start today. Speak for 5 minutes to yourself in the mirror. Find a language partner online. Record your voice on your phone. Choose progress over perfection. Be patient and kind to yourself. Celebrate every small victory because each word you speak is a step forward. The journey to fluency is not a race. It's a steady process of showing up, trying, learning, and repeating. You already have the foundation. The knowledge is within you. Now it's time to unlock it, to give it a voice. You absolutely have what it takes. Keep listening, keep practicing, and soon you'll find that the words flow more easily, and you are not just understanding English, but truly communicating in it. Thank you so much for joining me today on English in Advance. I hope this episode has left you feeling inspired and empowered. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on future episodes designed to help you on your English journey. And be sure to hit that notification bell. That way, you'll be the first to know when a new lesson is ready for you. Keep up the amazing work, and I'll talk to you next time.